One of the hardest things in game development is recognising when you've become married to an idea or a feature simply because of the work it took to create it. It could be just that you're really proud of the idea, or you had to overcome some challenges during implementation, but sometimes these things can make you blindly loyal to something without considering whether it's actually enjoyable for the player. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everyone. My name's Mike and I'm a new solo developer working on my first release. It's a platform shooter with multiple zones, exciting mini-games and challenging boss encounters called TurtleRun. The first two zones are available via the Steam demo. TurtleRun is releasing in Q1 of this year and you can give it a wishlist on Steam to help me out, as well as to be notified when the game is released and take advantage of the launch sale. So on the topic of recognising things in your game that just aren't fun or no longer fit into what the game has become, I had this revelation recently with one of the mini-games. Here's what I had before. I love dice and chance and RNG, but after playing through the game so many times, it stood out as a really weak minigame because there's no actual choice from the player. You just jump into the dice and hope for the best, and it's not very fun or engaging. Because I came up with the idea and programmed it so early into my game dev journey, it neither matches the caliber of the other minigames nor represents my abilities as a developer. This can happen as you get further throughout development, since your skills and abilities to come up with and implement ideas improve throughout the process of development, meaning that quite often you'll end up wanting to redo a lot of the early stuff by the time you get to the end. Thankfully this hasn't happened too often, but you should never be scared to do that. Just keep the code somewhere, you might use it again in future and tweak it to become something that is enjoyable. I really do like the concept of the game, and I think it's not a million miles away from being something really cool. I'm also quite proud of the dice and its animation, and I spent a lot of time working on pixel art to get something I was happy with. I guess this made me have the blinders on to whether or not the game was actually fun for the player though. It's a bitter pill to swallow removing or replacing features from your game, but ultimately feels so much better when you've done it, especially if what you've replaced it with is notably better. I made the decision to replace this dice minigame with something completely different. A sequence memory game where the player has to pay attention to the order in which these shells open and then repeat the opening pattern on their turn. It's obviously not an original idea, but off the top of my head I can't actually think of another game that does this. What is definitely original though is the implementation of it. The combination of sound effects, art, timings, rounds. This is what makes game development so rewarding as an artistic endeavour. Each round becomes increasingly more difficult, and like all of the other mini-games in TurtleRun, you are playing for a bonus damage modifier that you can take into the upcoming boss encounter. In case you don't know already, that's how TurtleRun is structured. There are 4 different zones, each consisting of 3 platformer levels, a mini-game and a boss encounter. It's a formula I'm really happy with, and I genuinely think the game is very fun to play. I'm so much happier now with this mini-game, and it feels a lot more on par with the rest of the game, so it's a bit of a weight off. The good news is that this new mini-game is part of the second zone, the beach zone, which means it's available to play for free right now in the TurtleRun demo. Go check that out on Steam and give the game a wishlist if you enjoy yourself. With the TurtleRun development cycle soon coming to an end, we're in a really heavy playtesting phase where I'm trying to get as much feedback as possible. I've currently got a small team of testers that play most of the updates and have found so many bugs and gave me a lot of great ideas. I can't imagine the difference in quality that the game would have without them. The thing is though, I could really do with more testers, and this is where you come in. If you join the Cappiche Games Discord via the description below and let me know that you're interested in playtesting, I'll sort you out with a Steam key that will give you access to the latest build where you can play through the full game and have your say on features and adjustments that you think would make the game better, as well as reporting those pesky bugs that are just invisible to me sometimes as the developer. I can say that a huge percentage of feedback I've received has led to positive change in the game, and I try my best to be as objective as possible with all of it to ensure I'm developing the game with players in mind. This is my first game, but I plan on it being the first of many, so I'm trying to build up a small community here and on Discord where you can follow the journey on upcoming games as well. So if that sounds good to you, the link is down below and I look forward to seeing you there. Speaking of super valuable feedback, I recently got a comment on one of my YouTube videos from someone who had played through the demo and was kind enough to share their thoughts. They had a lot of feedback, and obviously I don't implement absolutely everything that people say, or I'd never be not making changes and the game wouldn't really feel like my own thing at all. But this particular comment had so many seemingly simple but incredibly useful thoughts that I had overlooked due to being a new developer and learning on the go. The main thing being the feeling of the player movement. There was no weight to the player. Upon tapping left or right, movement was immediately at full speed, and this made the player feel extremely light and made it very difficult to make the micro adjustments that are required on some of the tricky platforming sections. Now, player movement is increased in small increments when movement starts and decreased in small decrements when movement stops, also known as acceleration and deceleration. The difference this has made to how the game feels is insane. That extra bit of weightiness makes the game feel fairer and movement feel much more natural. Another thing that was suggested in the same comment that I decided to act upon was jump buffering. This is when there is a small grace period that allows the player to press the jump button before they return to the floor and still jump upon making contact with the floor. This grace period is only a few frames, but it allows for much more fluidity in areas where there are multiple jumps, and it feels way better than having your jump not register just because you were a frame or two short of being on the floor. Coyote time is the time in which the player can still jump after moving off of a platform, named after Coyote from Looney Tunes and based on the time where he runs off the cliff but hasn't fallen yet. This allows a bit more forgiveness to the player when they jump slightly later but are still within a few frames of being grounded. It's just a small adjustment that adds a lot of feel to the game and reduces frustration from the player thinking they were still on the floor and should have been able to perform the jump. Extremely useful for areas of max range jumps and is a pretty mandatory feature in platformer controls. This already existed in the game but has been slightly increased to what I think is the correct amount of frames. There was a slight challenge that took a bit of thinking to implement jump buffering and Coyote time together, but after sleeping on it, realised what the issue was. I'm now really happy with how the movement feels, and after making a few level design adjustments for areas that can no longer be reached with the slight reduction in instant movement speed, I think the game has improved so much just from these few changes. Thanks very much to Make It So Games for the feedback. It turns out they're a game dev as well, working on a game called Trapped 6. I recommend going to check out their videos as they've been making games for a long time and definitely know what they're talking about. It feels really great to get back to devlogs. As I said in my last video, I don't want to force them out and I only really want to make one when there is something of value to show. So hopefully you found this interesting, and I'll definitely be making more as we approach the end of development and start looking into a testing and marketing phase prior to release. It feels quite surreal that back in March of last year I didn't even really know what a game engine was, and I certainly hadn't heard of Game Maker or considered making my own game. It's such a fun and rewarding journey, and no matter of success levels that may or may not come from it, I know I'll never ever regret the time I've spent honing these new skills and expressing myself in a medium that I find genuinely interesting. You can't ask for much more than that. So, as always, thank you so much for watching the video. Subscribe if you're new here and check out and wishlist my game TurtleRun on Steam if you think it looks fun. Any potential testers or even non-testers who just want to follow the journey and chat about game dev, join the Cappiche Games Discord via the link in the description. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.